What's up guys, today we're going to see a complete blueprint of how to play the bishop's opening, the best opening for white. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, let's go ahead and get started. The bishop's opening comes out of you moving your bishop, the bishop to c4, which instantly catches your opponents off guard, drags them off their familiar territory, plus there are a ton of traps along the way, even Vishy Anand and other top GMs got trapped in this opening. I'll show you in a moment, it's also my favorite opening. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, and let's go ahead and get started. What can your opponent do at this point? In the vast majority of the cases, they're going to be developing their minor pieces in one order or the other, but it doesn't really matter. We'll analyze all of that, and usually our plans will be the same. For example, let's say they bring this knight out first, and we also do the same. Notice that we delay development of the kingside knight because we have some attacking opportunities which we have in reserve. If your opponent tries to be a copycat and just mimics your moves, there is an unpleasant surprise for them. You're going to play queen g4, and notice that this move is only possible because you don't have your knight standing in the way. You don't have your knight right there, otherwise it would block the diagonal. But without the knight, you have this strange looking move queen to g4. It goes against common chess wisdom that says avoid early queen attacks, your opponent will attack the queen, will gain tempos, but in this case, it's actually a very powerful move to play. Now, some of your opponents will actually try to make use of that advice, gain tempos, attack your queen, they'll play knight f6, which is a major blunder, it overlooks your main intent behind the move queen g4, you go ahead and grab this pawn on g7 and hit the rook, and if they wish to win more tempos, attacking your queen, and it's actually the most played move in this position, the move rook g8, then you play queen takes f7, putting together this sort of scholar's checkmate. In majority of the cases, your opponents will notice that you're threatening this pawn and also the rook, and they will play the most played move queen to f6, which guards this pawn on g7 as well as hits your pawn on f2. And the next move is absolutely brilliant. I'll give you a couple seconds to try to guess it in case you're unfamiliar with this variation. While you're thinking about the move, let me make a quick announcement. It is actually my birthday today. I'm turning 37 and I've been playing chess since I was 6. Crazy, I know. Anyway, if you ever wanting to get better at chess and achieve your chess goals faster, now's the best time to do so. To celebrate my birthday, we're running a huge discount, up to 70% off the price of my premium courses. These courses helped thousands of students by now to level up your chess, and I'd be happy to help you just as well. So if you're curious, you can get all the details in the description below the video and find something that you'll love. Back to the game, the refutation is absolutely brutal. Not only we do not defend this pawn, we actually kind of force black to capture it by going knight to d5. And you have this monstrous knight hitting the queen, hitting this pawn on z7, and therefore threatening fork to the king and rook. So if anyone wished to a good knight, here you have it. Now the crazy part is we are pushing black to capture this pawn on f2, and at first it looks like black is almost winning the game, but actually it's a false impression, because after king to d1, it turns out that you got a ton of threats here. You're still threatening this pawn, you're still threatening the other one, therefore you're going to capture one of their rooks actually. This queen on f2 looks scary at first, but in reality has no moves. Your bishop is doing a great job controlling these squares, your queen is covering this one, and actually the queen cannot defeat your entire army, because the queen is alone, and you have plenty of pieces around. In fact, this queen can get in danger and can be captured. Let me show you how. Let's say black notices that this is the threat, they decide to prevent this move somehow, let's say they go g6, and you've got this thing, forking the king and rook, but it's even stronger to play knight to h3, and all of a sudden the queen is almost trapped. Just look at this, there are not many squares where a queen could possibly go to. The only one is queen d4, and now it hits, this bishop on c4, and we lock the door by going d3, and on the next move black plays whatever, we go c3, and now the queen is totally surrounded and is trapped. So on the next move, black captures, you capture the queen, then one of the other pieces, and you're totally winning. That was an absolutely crazy game played by Mamedyarov here by white. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first, let me show you most played moves by black. These are the moves that you are most likely to encounter. In most cases, black is unsure how to deal with all these threats, because it indeed is extremely hard for black, and therefore they just try to counterattack. They go d6, hoping that you'll overlook this bishop taking your queen. But you don't. Instead, you play queen takes g7, the move that you intended to play anyway. Now this rook is hanging, and also their king is somewhat also in danger. If If they try to play bishop e6, then that's yet another blunder. This time knight takes c7, and after the king moves, we can go ahead and grab this bishop, but black cannot recapture because the pawn is now pinned. So not only they couldn't save their rook in the corner, but they also lost the bishop along the way. Anyways, if they don't wish to lose this rook right now, they have to move the knight so that the other rook guards this one. And now you're up a piece. You can win in multiple different ways. If you wish to humiliate your opponent, you can sack your queen. And once your opponent is happy and notices that he can grab it, you then respond with this check. And after that, you get your queen back and you end up into this easily winning endgame where you're up a bishop and a pawn and black has no attack. Back to the game that I promised. Mamedyarov is playing white against Harikrishna, and both are strong players. Black played king f8, guarding this pawn, also sidestepping a potential fork right there. White goes knight h3, he switches back to that idea of capturing the queen, and black responds with a great counterblow, pawn h5. Not easy to find that move most of your opponents want. Black is just somehow trying to disrupt white's plan. White goes queen g5, this queen is still under the attack, black goes back. Now pawn d3, we know that white is intending to play c3 and simply capture the queen, therefore black needs to be careful, but black was careful. He played bishop e7, countering the queen and also providing this escape path for their own queen. White goes queen g3, after knight f6, looks like black is actually doing fine, but now their king stands on this open file and it's kind of dangerous for white. White is now starting to put pressure. We've got the queen, the rook, the knight is ready to jump forward, this bishop is putting pressure, so it feels very dangerous for black. However, black once again came with an interesting idea. He played knight takes e4. He capitalizes on this pin, therefore white cannot take it, and at the same time he threatens the queen on g3, also kind of destroying white's center. But white came up with a really beautiful refutation. Knight takes e7, just sacrificing the queen. And the idea is it opens up the diagonal for the bishop so that together with the rook, it starts creating those threats. Therefore, if the queen is captured, there is here a very subtle move. Rook takes f7 would be possible, but it's even stronger to play knight g6. Checking the king, the pawn is pinned, it can't move. And the king can go left or right, but either way, it's not going to help. If it goes right, there's bishop takes f7 followed by knight g5. If it goes left, there's bishop takes here, checking the king. Our knight is taking away these two squares. After king moves, there's bishop g5. Not only you're developing a bishop, this time it's virtually a checkmate, and this is the bishop's opening, baby. Your opponent is gonna learn it the hard way. What else can your opponent do to defend this pawn as well as this one and the rook? Well, they can move the king or move pawn to g6, but in both cases their king gets compromised. In this case, it's better for you to move your queen back one square, because otherwise your opponent can attack it this way, or maybe even with some d5, some discard attacks right here. So it's better to slide back to f3, hitting this pawn on f7, and once black covers that, then you just keep developing. But the downside for black right here is all these weaknesses that they got, and it's not easy to cover that. Plus, you keep putting pressure. Now, the first thing that you also need to counter is potential knight d4 threat, but it's very easy to do that because you are going to develop your knight anyway, and simultaneously you take control of this square. If they go d6 and they try to play bishop g4, if you wish, you could easily stop this by going h3, but it's not a major threat. You can actually ignore it and just develop. And now, here's one of your main ideas. If your opponent is careless, let's say he castles or anything else, you can go bishop g5 and you win the game thanks to this pin. The knight cannot move. Otherwise, you're going to capture it and keep attacking the king. If he tries to guard it, you can just add more pressure to the knight, and now black is done. They're going to be losing either the knight or the queen back there, and you keep attacking. It's interesting that two super grandmasters fell into the same trap here, playing black. They played bishop g4, attacking the queen. Queen goes here to g3. Now these pieces are a little bit loose. We're going to play bishop g5, put pressure, so they move the bishop back to e6. We don't have to worry about this. Our bishop on c4 is already guarded, therefore no need to worry. We just push our plan, bishop g5, establishing this pin. We know that black needs to be careful. He tried playing ace h6, kicking this bishop back, but there was an unpleasant surprise. Instead of moving the bishop, white played queen h4, and all of a sudden they're winning. Black can't guard this knight on f6, and white is winning thanks to this pin over the h file. If the bishop is captured, white is going to grab the rook, keep attacking, and win the game. There was a game by Hikaru who won against Chinese Super GM Yu, rated over 2700, and the next year there was the exact same game played by Mamedyarov against another strong GM. So you can see that even for strong grandmasters, it's not easy to escape as black. Speaking about top grandmasters, Vishy Anand fell victim to the next trap. Here, black will quite often develop the kingside knight. In this case, we just develop as usual. Notice that we keep delaying our kingside knight development. We'll see why in a second. Here, black goes bishop c5, standard setup by black as they play in the Italian game and whatnot. Now, what do you do here? Previously, when the knight wasn't here on f6, we used to play queen g4 hitting this pawn. But now we can't do this anymore. We can't go queen g4 as this square is already controlled. In this case, we actually use our main plan. We go pawn f4. And this is kind of an improved version of the King's Gambit or the Vienna Gambit, where you launch this kingside attack, you put pressure without even sacrificing the pawn, because this pawn is already defended. Therefore, if your opponent wishes to trade, good. They only help you to develop the bishop. You also now have advantage in the center. You just develop that you can castle kingside or queenside. Your pawns are always ready to roll. So then things are pretty good. Now, it's better for black not to capture there, so they usually play pawn d6, and then you continue with knight to f3. Notice that we only develop the knight once we push the pawn forward so that our knight would not be on the way. This way, we are ready to put pressure on the king side. What can they do here? There are a number of attempts for black, and knight g4 is a very tempting try because it feels like your weak squares can be a nice target for black and they can attack you. However, Vishy Anand played this move knight g4, and of course a ton of amateurs played that as well. But the refutation is brutal as always. We just counter-strike. Instead of guarding this square anyhow, we could do that by going rook f1, but we just counter-attack with knight g5. And we do the same thing to black, actually. But in our case, it's even more effective. Because once black tries doing whatever, let's say they castle, or they can jump knight f2 straight away, it would be the similar thing. Let's say they castle, which is a natural try, and now we can play f5, grabbing space on the king side. This way, we also cut off this light square bishop. It no longer guards the knight on g4. Therefore, the knight is under the attack. Notice that our knight is actually guarded. Therefore, black cannot capture it. So our space advantage due to this pawn f5 plays a good role for us here. Now, they are certainly not worried about this threat because they were going to play knight f2 anyway, and they think that they're forking your habit pieces and winning the game. But of course, the fun is not going to last long because you play queen h5 and you add even more pressure to these two weak pawns and you quickly overwhelm black. Just by the sheer amount of errors, you can see that black's in trouble. They gotta stop queen takes h7 checkmate, and if they try this by doing h6, then you just capture the other one. That also attacks the queen. That prepares this discover check from our bishop, and black is done. For example, if they sack, we recapture, and on the next move after king moves anywhere, there are many ways for white to continue their attack. Queen g6 and many others. Bishop takes h6 might be possible, or might not because of queen h4. But the move that I like most, just because it's beautiful, is bishop to g5. Pretty cool sacrifice. And it can be captured both ways, but in both cases, black loses the game. If they capture it by the queen, there is queen g8. That square would no longer be defended. So for example, if queen takes, there is queen g8 checkmate. And if instead black captures the bishop by their pawn, there is queen h5. This time also a checkmate because of our bishop control in that square. And finally, the queen here on d8 is running out of squares to go, because if it wants to keep guarding this square on g8, it has to go all the way to h8. The only safe square to keep controlling this one, but in that case, it leads to that smothered checkmate, where the queen stands on the way, and we deliver this funny checkmate. Alright, let's try a slightly different scenario. Last time, black first developed the knight, which is very natural, and we did the same. This time, black jumped to g4 straight away, threatening the same fork, and our reaction is very similar. We wish to counterattack. Now you do this, in this case you don't have the knight right here, so you can't jump similarly, but you can still just reverse the move order. You play f5, cutting off this bishop so that the knight on g4 is now hanging. They move it here on f2, thinking that they're winning, but in fact it's the opposite, because you play queen h5, threatening this scholar's checkmate. Now they gotta do something about that. If they castle, we already know that it can get really dangerous for black right here. You can bring the knight right here, then to g5, and we get to the same position where you overwhelm them with all these attacks against these two pawns, and they're gonna be done within a couple moves. Can they just push the pawn forward and solve all the problems that way? Not really. It only delays your attack for one move, because you just move forward, and now you wish to enter through the square g7, hitting the rook, hitting this pawn f7. You're ready to play bishop g5. Let's say if they capture a rook, you can add one more piece into the attack and threaten queen. There's also queen g7, knight d5, and you also put together this decisive attack very quickly. Therefore, they're still done. If they try to block once again, this time you can ignore it. As usual, we wish to counterattack, you just capture right here. With a ton of threats once again. They can't recapture because it's pinned. If they take the bishop instead, your queen will give birth to a daughter pretty soon, and black will also be done. There were a number of cool games where black just moved the queen away. Then you bring the knight out, threatening this fork to the king and queen, and they have to move the queen away somewhere. So if they move the queen to a4, you can win actually in a number of different ways. Your attack is so strong, you have a bunch of attacking pieces, put pressure all around, that it's really impossible for black to survive here. For example, after queen g7, going after the rook, if they wish to save it, you then grab this pawn, checking the king needs to move, now you grab this rook, and again it's easy to see that you have a whole lot of checkmate and threats all around. You don't have to memorize this whole variation, it's like pretty simple to see like the general concept that you wish to counterattack on the king side, and you normally succeed in doing so. So let's say if they capture this knight, you just keep checking them, and after a couple more moves it leads to this stunning checkmate, and it is once again that moment where you type your opponent, it's the bishop's opening, baby. What else can your opponent play? I want to be fully ready, and we have just a few more little variations left. Now, so far we talked about them trying to take advantage of your weaknesses, but it usually fails. What else can they do? If they just castle, do nothing special, then you can cramp their position with pawn f5. Now this bishop can't get out, and you're still ready to play bishop g5, delivering this pin, putting more pressure, delivering your attack. Thanks to your space advantage, it's usually simple to do so. Now, the other move that you're going to be facing frequently is bishop to g4, establishing this pin. But you can break it by just pushing your pawn forward. They have to trade, they can't go back because you can keep chasing the bishop, and it's going to be trapped. Therefore, they have to probably trade on f3, and now they have this really tempting move knight to d4. Feels like they're hitting the queen as well as this pawn on c2. But we're going to be merciless, as usual. We're going to counterattack. We have space advantage on the king side that usually gives you an upper hand there. So we go queen g3, threatening this pawn, and as they happily grab this one, checking your king, winning the rook, you attack the knight, they capture right here, but after queen takes g7, it turns out that your counterattack is stronger, and your opponent is going to realize it just a few moves too late. Right now you're hitting the rook as well as queen takes f7 checkmate. Therefore, rook to f8 is coming. Now you open up the f-file. Then you can also bring your bishop into play with a tempo. They gotta guard the knight. Then you bring your rook into play, also adding even more pressure. And now it's already quite tough. You wish to capture the knight. You keep hitting the pawn, the king, etc. Let's say, I think the most played move by black here is trying to escape this way. But then they expose this square f7, and you can counterattack. The king needs to move. Now you can go ahead and capture this pawn with a ton of threats all around. For example, if they capture this bishop, there's this checkmate, and probably if black plays something else. Anyways, with such an exposed king, it's easy for you to attack it. Let me take a moment to thank you guys for your support, for your birthday greetings. Of course, it's very nice of you, and it's always very touching. You know, I'm just a regular man. I'm also a family guy with 2 little daughters. Sometimes life is hectic, but I always try to deliver my best for you, and therefore, of course, I always appreciate your support. The birthday offers are gonna last for a few more days, therefore you still have a chance to take advantage of them. While I'm celebrating, you can steal my premium courses at 70% off, and I'll be more than happy to help you on your chess journey.